Welcome to the Great Bid Adjustment Problem Training. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Green, co-founder of Jungler, and we are going to be going over kind of the framework and how we view and a bit of the nitty-gritty of how we make bid adjustments at Jungler. So let's start diving into it. So this is actually the spark. This is the thing that had me up at 6 a.m. saying, I need to make this presentation because we're going over is the bidding strategy. So if you don't know, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I put out a lot of content, and there was a bit of some people asking questions on this. So my thinking on bidding is we need to figure out what strategies get the best results in each scenario, and then create a system that helps us apply the best solution depending on those variables. So that's kind of the ideas we're going to be going through. So again, this is a bid framework. This isn't, I'm not going to actually put out a specific bid formula because we have SOPs and we have our internal systems for this. What I want to give you is a framework of how we actually built and think about our internal systems, because to me, if we can really understand and explain the why, it helps us make better decisions on the what. So this is, kind of your typical, like when you're looking at bid adjustments, how it plays out, right? So you have your target, which in this case is a singular target A cost. So we have our target A cost, and then depending on where this target falls, that will determine if something is a low A cost keyword or a high A cost keyword. So this is kind of how we look at it, right? So our target's right here, and we have keyword 1 over here and keyword 2. So these ones fall into like our low A cost here. And then we have like keyword 3 and 4. So these ones are high A cost because, again, we've determined our target. So targets are very important. But so like, great, pack it up, right? We have a target A cost. We know we need to optimize for it. We're going to change our bids. So we're going to see where we are versus where we want to be, make that calculation, and then adjust for that, right? So in a perfect world, we would be able to do this. However, there is one major problem, and that is there are these two opposing factors when it comes to bid adjustment. So there's us, again, what our target is, where we want, where our current thing is, and then we're going to adjust for that, how much we can pay, where we are versus where we want to be. Then there's the market. So the market dictates the cost. And this is like the main issue that you see a lot of people trying to scooch their way around is, so if we're advertising on Blue Backpack, for us to show up on these top ad spots, the market's going to dictate, say, hey, you need this specific cost per click to be able to show up here, right? And then if we're willing to pay it, great, we show up. And if we don't pay it, well, then there's an issue, and we're going to get into more specifics on that. But you can't rage against the market. And this is the one thing that I see a lot of sellers at this point really fighting against is, why is my A cost going up? Why am I not getting the same numbers that I did before? And it's mainly this, it's that the cost per clicks are rising, and there's major issues with that. And it's creating, decreases in our performance metrics. And it's a problem. It's a really big problem. Remember, I said two opposing forces. So great. We know we have a problem, and we know we can't really get around what the market is dictating as our cost per click. So then how in the heck do we adjust for this? Right? So this is how we can adjust for it, is realizing this truth is that all keywords are not created equal. And if we can create a framework around this and recognizing it, then that is how you can kind of move within whatever the market is dictating and still get the results that you're looking for. All right. So remember, we have this, low A cost, high A cost, and our keywords that are falling within this framework, right? Well, not all keywords are created equal. So if not all keywords are created equal, then how do we determine kind of the hierarchy or how important keywords are? So the thing is that there are other factors within a keyword's performance that can help us determine this. And we're going to get into even more incremental things that we can set. But these are just a couple of them. We're going to get more in depth, but we might be factoring in orders, conversion rate, spend, the total impact, the ad sales, the number of clicks. So how much available data is there? Maybe we're factoring in match types. Hint, you should be factoring in match types, but I'm going to get into how we would do that. So the problem with most bid formulas is they are completely blind to other exterior factors. They blindly follow, say, a singular ACoS, a singular performance metric, and they just say, all right, so, based on this, we're not there. We need to adjust for that. And they're not getting really incremental with their performance factors. And the issue with that, again, going back to the markets dictating where we show up, is say we have a ranking keyword, right? Maybe we have a blue backpack. We want to rank on blue backpack. We determine it's a good keyword. So we launch it, and all of a sudden our ACoS is 80% and we're targeting a 30%. Well, if we're singularly, again, going back to the blind formulas, if we're singularly following a blind formula, what we would do is we would say, okay, so 80 and 50, so 30% or maybe even 50%, we're going to significantly decrease that, right? Because the difference between 80 and 30 is quite significant. So all of a sudden we decrease it, and your visibility goes in the toilet, and you've just launched that keyword into the no sales chasm, and all of a sudden, like, your sales are decreasing in your ads, which is something that, again, going back to the two opposing factors, is something we have to navigate with. But here's the other issue that is not often talked about in this specific scenario, is that ACoS is spend divided by sales. If you've been in Amazon advertising for any length of time, you know this formula, right? This is a division problem and can also be represented as a fraction. So the thing is, spend divided by sales, right? Spend, we know how to decrease it. We decrease our bids. That's why bid adjustments are so important, because we can definitely directly influence this spend, piece of the division problem. Well, the thing is, if you significantly decrease the spend and significantly decrease your visibility on a specific keyword, oftentimes that comes at the expense of sales. Remember, I said that, division problems definitely can be represented as fractions. If you remember your fractions, you remember if you reduce the fraction, it's still the exact same fraction, right? So it's the exact same number. It's just in a different format. So if our spend decreases, but our sales decrease, our division out, the answer to our division problem is still going to be the same thing. So if we have an 80% ACoS and we significantly reduce our spend, but our sales significantly reduce, we often will get the exact same 80% ACoS, and we'll also, on top of that, get a decrease in our sales numbers. So that's not cool. So how in the heck are we supposed to adjust for this, right? So singularly adjusting, we agree, it's not the best course of action, okay? So how we would navigate this is, what we do and what our bid algorithm is really set up to is to weigh the account impact / goals of a particular keyword. So if we have a keyword that is a ranking keyword, it has a significant amount of sales, and we have really good conversion rates on it, that keyword is going to be determined as having a much more significant impact on our goals in the specific account. And so we're going to be a little bit more sensitive with how we adjust these bids, versus if we have a keyword that has, virtually no impact on sales, the ACoS is super high, we have a lot of clicks, well, then we probably really need to be much more speedy with our adjustments on that particular bid. So by weighing where a keyword kind of falls into the impact on the account will help us make good decisions when, again, factoring in the visibility and the market. All right, so we're still going to fall into these buckets, right? Any good bid algorithm, any good bid system is going to take a look at these factors, right? So it's going to say, do we have high ACoS? Do we have clicks with no sales? These bids need to be lower, again, to achieve specific targets. If we have a low ACoS or we have low impressions, these bids should probably be raised to, again, hit specific targets. So if we're still using this framework, but we're factoring in things, how does that play out? So let's go over that now. So what we actually have in Jungler is performance buckets, right? So we are weighing the impact of a specific keyword based on, other determining factors, which we'll get into in a second. And then we're saying, okay, so this is a high ACoS keyword. It's above our targets, but we have a much more significant impact of this keyword on the total account. So it's falling into this performance bucket, into this, individual framework for adjustments, and we're going to treat that one differently than a keyword that we determined has little to no impact on the account, and so we will be fine with adjusting that much more aggressively. Honestly, we have more than, say, 2 performance buckets, but just to illustrate, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how you can have like individual goals still in specific performance tiers. Right, so these are the things that will kind of determine those buckets, okay? So we're going to figure out, we can adjust what our targets are, and we can adjust the sensitivity of on these particular targets. So for instance, one thing we would take into account on, say, a particular product would be the profit margins, right? So if you have a product that's running at, say, 20% profit margins versus one that has a, significant, say we have even a 50% profit margin, that would be awesome, right? So our goals and targets for those specific products are going to be different. And so that's going to determine where we would fall on this linear scale. So going back to, say, our performance buckets right here, right? So if we have a 20% ACoS target and we have a 45% ACoS target, we'll say our specific keyword is running at 35%, right? For if that keyword we're bidding on for a particular product and our target is, say, 20%, that's going to fall into our high ACoS bucket, right? Because that's above our 20% target. However, if that is on our product that is looking at, say, a 45% ACoS, well, that's going to fall into our low ACoS bucket. So you can see how adjusting these is going to change what performance buckets or how we go about analyzing those bids. And then we also can adjust the sensitivity, right? So again, going back to specific performance metrics, maybe for product 1, we're in a ranking phase. And so for this one, we need to be really sensitive to our sales. We want to definitely take into account our conversion rates. We need to make sure that we're being much more aggressive on certain things. And so this one's probably going to have a lower amount of sensitivity or higher amount of sensitivity. So we need to be very sensitive with how we're making our adjustments. Versus product 2, like, we're already well established. This product is doing amazing organically. We already have rankings. We just need to kind of sustain at this point. So maybe the amount of sensitivity we have to have is much lower, because if we lower that, well, we still have our organic rankings, we still have some visibility, so we're not as worried about maybe majorly decreasing some visibility for like this particular product. And product 3 might fall somewhere in between this. Right. So the thing is that the robots don't have all the data, unfortunately. Going back to like, where are we doing on targets? How much sensitivity do we need to have to a product? For instance, if we have a very low amount of stock on a particular product, well, maybe we need to be a little bit less sensitive because we're going to go out of stock anyways. We might as well adjust for profitability. Or if we have a very high amount of stock on a particular product and we have a very low amount of visibility, well, we need to be okay with pushing things a little bit heavier because we need to worry about our, storage fees in this case. So there's really honestly no AI or there's no APIs out there that are going to be able to give you all of the data inputs that are necessary to make these determinations. And so that's why robots don't always get it right, and fully automated systems are not always going to get it right because it's leaving out several very important factors. So the thing is, like, this stuff can't be automated, right? So what targets we're adjusting for, how much sensitivity we're having to these targets, these are definitely manual inputs, right? So they're ones that we probably can input once and then kind of make incremental adjustments for, but they're things, this is like the manual piece. When you hear people saying like, you can't fully rely on automations and, we need to have a human oversight, this is a human oversight that they're talking about. Like, what targets are we going after, and then what's the sensitivity on these targets, right? So then what we also need to do is we need to determine our performance buckets, right? And so that's what we've done at Jungler is we have said, okay, so these are what we see as our performance buckets. These are the things that we need to be sensitive to. And then again, depending on these two factors, where we're targeting and the sensitivity, that will determine what buckets a specific keyword is going to fall into. So these are the few things that we factor in. There might be a couple more, but this should give you an idea of how you can start going through and developing your own buckets, right? So goals. Goals is super important. Again, ranking. If we are more profitable, that also kind of goes back to targets. Targets can determine the bucket as well. Another really big one is going to be the order and sales velocity, right? So if we have a really good order and sales velocity on a particular keyword, and then well as a good conversion rate, because ranking, which is a huge thing in Amazon advertising, and one of the really big factors in why we actually still run advertising is going to be to allow for better organic rankings on specific keywords. So if we have a very high sales velocity and we have really good conversion rates, those are really good factors for us to increase that organic ranking for specific keywords. So we probably want to be much more sensitive and maybe allow for a little bit less in performance because we know that there's some particular upside on these keywords. Spend. The impact of spend. Now, again, we're still taking in orders and sales velocity into account, but say we have a very high amount of spend through a particular keyword and the performance isn't all that great judging by these other factors. Well, we know that we can decrease the downside, which is a high amount of spend, without sacrificing a lot of the upside, which is, potential in ranking, good metrics. So if we have a very high cost, we have low order volumes, low conversion rates, low impact on sales, and high amount of spend, that's definitely a keyword that is a good candidate for more aggressive optimizations. And the other thing is, so like in the number of clicks, how many clicks is how much accumulated data do you have on a particular keyword? Like how much can you really know that this keyword has adequately been tested? And then another one, of course, is match types. And this is one that I think is also often overlooked. So the issue with completely overlooking match types is that if you're only looking at, say, at sales velocity and you're only looking at like the percentage of ad sales, often what can happen is you're like, oh my goodness, this particular keyword has a wealth of orders through it. It's doing really great. It has a high impact in the account. Let's go and scale this up. Well, with, say, broad match or automatic targeting, those, not that the keywords are like artificially inflated or anything, it's just due to the nature of those particular match types, they have the potential to trigger a lot more searches, right? So the potential for orders and sales is a lot higher. And so what often ends up happening if you're only looking at these other determining factors is you're like, great, these ones are working awesome, let's scale the bids, let's get more orders. And then the main issue with that is that Amazon is the one determining which searches you're showing up on. Now, typically it just kind of goes as planned and everything's great, but there is a potential for Amazon to either stop showing you on particular search pages that you were before, and or you will have a significant fluctuation in the market. For instance, like Q4, these keywords work awesome, and then all of a sudden going into the slump of January, all of a sudden conversion rates aren't that great, and you're still showing up on those keywords that, again, so you have high bids, so they have high spend, and then the performance just goes down, and all of a sudden you'll see a shoot up in the A costs. And so this is definitely something, so we've observed that that's an issue, and we just try and make sure we're correcting for that. So this is kind of how it works. I'm trying to get myself out of the way. So with each of these factors, again, I remember I said that there's individual buckets, and then depending on where it falls in this particular bucket is going to be how sensitive we treat the keyword, right? So how does that actually play out? Well, it's actually a bunch of ceilings and floors. So if you know, like high A costs were decreasing bids, low A costs were probably raising, low impressions were raising, clicks with no sales were decreasing. So what we do is we say, okay, so how sensitive do we need to treat these keywords? And then let's make logical groupings of these. And then we're going to determine, okay, so these ones we need to be more sensitive with. So we're going to actually put a higher floor on these because we don't want to significantly decrease these particular keywords because we need to be more sensitive to changes versus maybe say this bucket. Okay, so these are ones like low impact on the account, low potential for rankings. Let's make like a much lower floor because again, we're perfectly fine with making more significant changes because we recognize that there's a lower impact on the account of these particular subset of keywords. Right, so ceilings and floors. Again, we still have like our typical bid adjustment frameworks. And so we're still using some very common bid formulas. However, so we're still adjusting for targets. Remember, our targets are determining which bucket a keyword is going to fall into. So targets are still really important, but what you can do is you can say, all right, so based on my target, based on where I want to be, how different is that from my current performance and where I currently am? And then I need to, kind of determine how far something is going to fall based on how sensitive we know that it needs to be. Right? So these are our bid adjustment levers. And kind of this is like the overall framework of how our bid algorithm works. So we set specific targets. And again, these specific targets don't actually have to be at a product level, although they can be. We can also set these at a keyword level, campaign level, portfolio level, product grouping level. Sensitivity, again, can be set at all of those individual levels as well. We determine like how sensitive do we need to be to specific things. Again, this all depends on the account. So there's some accounts that the marketplaces require a very high amount of sensitivity to, versus other accounts, the sensitivity and just the competition in the market is relatively low. And so what we looked to create is a framework that allows us to be sensitive to how the market is performing on the particular products while still, again, making logical decisions on how sensitive, specific factors on keywords. All right, so the entire point and the reason why I've again come up with this particular framework is because I don't want to disregard intuition. Remember, the robots don't have all the factors. So I think I started like everybody else doing things very manual, right? But I think, or at least what I've observed, is that sellers or account managers or brand owners who are making manual bid adjustments often use this particular framework. For instance, they'll go in and say, okay, so I know this keyword is being advertised on this particular product. We're in a scaling phase, so I'm kind of okay with maybe being a little bit higher in ACoS up. Now, this is my specific ranking keyword that I've put in there that I really want to adjust for. And so I'm not going to, maybe it's 100%. And I just, that's not sustainable, but I really just need to quickly bring this down a little bit. So we're going to make small incremental adjustments. And so they're actually logically doing this. So the entire point of us creating this framework is because we don't want to disregard human intuition on products, because what we can do is we can now observe what's happening in the market, what's happening with the products, what needs to happen, and then what we can do is we can put our inputs in, so you remember the targets and sensitivity levels, and then allow our bid system to make those adjustments. Because the one issue with manual adjustments is when you are faced with an account that has thousands of bids that need to be adjusted, oftentimes like even hundreds or thousands of different products, at some point the logical decisions just break down if you're doing things manually. So what we've created is a system that allows us to still bring manual intuition, but allow the robots and the algorithm to make, kind of the final adjustments. And then what we do is we analyze the outputs, determine what needs to be adjusted in the inputs, and it becomes this good cycle of us constantly adjusting, again, being able to move within that opposition of where we want to be and where the market is telling us that we need to be.